Hey everybody, Neon here. I am bringing you the game of MissQQ versus Hype. This is another one of the games that have been happening in the WePlay tournament that's been happening this past week that has been ultra sweet. So this is one where I was really interested in talking about it from the perspective of some of the things that maybe the casters might have missed as one element, and then also some things that one of the players was particularly missing, because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this game. But particularly, I think that the casters, as you're listening to them, were confused by some of the decision making that was going on in various parts of the game in terms of playing for initiative and lane prioritization, and really we're kind of just like missing what was happening really in I think the actual what the plans were of the players, and it made a good deal of sense in that framework still. But anyway, we'll get into it. As always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know if there's any of the plays that I missed that you thought were interesting to discuss, and then also just to, support the channel. It really makes a big deal to share, etc. So let's get into the game of Hyped on green-blue versus MissQQ on red-black. To begin with, let's talk a little bit about these decks, though. So MissQQ was on a red-black gold deck, while the opponent Hype is on a blue-green, not exactly like a full combo deck, as I understand, not running any copies of Incarnation of Salamene, so kind of a fairer version of the combo decks. Like, this is something that we've seen varying degrees of in different builds of it, of anywhere between like something that's a full fair version of green-blue that's just a very mid-rangey deck, and ones that are full-on combo. So his version is kind of in between, has a little bit of a combo feel to it at times, but I don't think that it's full-on goes off exactly. But MissQQ is playing a deck that is the red-black gold generation deck, and the item of choice that she's opting for as her big ticket item in the shop is actually the Horn of the Alpha, which is in some respects like there's different advantages and disadvantages to the different items. The two that I think people most use right now are the Horn of the Alpha and the Vesture of the Tyrant. Horn of the Alpha has the advantage of being really threatening and actually like killing your opponent out of nowhere, dropping a whole bunch of damage onto the board, even like from maybe even if it gets annihilated, you can place it down and then immediately gets a bunch of damage onto the board. Like, that is a really appealing part of that card, but it doesn't stop you from dying. It doesn't defend you very well, while the Vesture of the Tyrant does a really good job of that. So in some respects, like, this is a pretty contentious thing. Now, one thing to note is that her build of the deck is only playing 2 copies of Payday, which is, I think, an oversight, and opting instead for playing multiple copies of the Iron Fog Goldmine, which just feels a little bit too clunky and slow, because I really would want to power out those high-value items in a more enticing way. And like playing these items right now, like for instance, we have the Traveler's Cloak and the Town Portal Scroll. Like, what are they accomplishing here? Like, what are we playing? I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up is that, like, I feel like we could have saved that gold and maybe use it with a Payday, possibly. I'm not sure. We do get a hipfire here that sets up the lethal in exchange with the creep, of course. So moving on to the second lane. Now, this is unfortunate we haven't had a curve into that Treant Protector from the side of MissQQ, which means that he is going to be sticking around in one piece. These Assassin's Apprentice, by the way, are just, like, not impressive cards. I mean, I understand why you have to play it. Like, you're an aggressive deck. It's a nice tool to have access to, that you get a little bit of extra damage here and there, but they're just kind of miserable. This is a good interaction, though, to point out. And it's always good to remember this, is that when you're playing out a Roseleaf Druid in this sort of situation, that it technically has the 8 health because of the 2 armor from the Treant Protector. It's just one of those, like, plays that comes up a lot, given the fact that he's the signature card of the Treant Protector. So identifying that and seeing, like, yeah, he'll survive by doing that is a really important little touch. Playing out the Stonehall Elite here in order to start growing him up a little bit, get some aggression here. I actually almost like taking the Compel from Hype's side and directing it into the Stonehall Elite, sacrificing the Kana. Part of the reason why also for this is that your hand doesn't have a lot of blue stuff in it. And really the only threat on the, like, there's 2 threats on the battlefield, and you can actually just, like, eliminate one entirely by just directing into it there on the left-hand side of the Drow Ranger into the Stonehall Elite, and that would act, or yeah, that would have been the way to do it. And that this is just kind of like an approach to the matchup where sacrificing that Kana isn't that big of a deal right now, because it doesn't break into that critical 25 gold amount, which, and since you know that MissQQ is playing the version that has the Horn of the Alpha, I really prefer that play in my mind. Now here we're deploying once again. All the creeps are going to be going into the center and into the right lane on the different sides. Ogre Magi deploying left in order to maybe fire off that ignite into one of the other lanes and buy some time before hopefully firing off an annihilation, and the annihilation is just drawn. Very nice. This is very, very good, very strong formula here, because this is just a really bad matchup, I think, for MissQQ, but the annihilations, like, it's just hard to kill your opponent before they come online, and that's really brutal and to actually, like, manage for the deck. Here we get the ignite on the right lane. Once again, there's the little synergy there of ignite plus Kana, because you really just build up the entire lane. It helps also, like, for trading your creeps with your opponent's creeps, and also just maybe setting up a giant Prey on the Weak. This move specifically I don't like. So we are spending a bunch of gold on the Mercenary Exiles to set up this big fat hit onto that tower. I don't like, I mean, getting that damage in, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I don't like it, though, because I think that the Horn of the Alpha has to be part of your way to win this game. And by doing this, like, you're really making yourself vulnerable to an annihilation, which is going to be coming next turn. You know there's a blue hero that's coming next turn. You have to have initiative going into that left lane with the coup de grace in order to actually survive there. Otherwise, you're just going to get totally wiped out. This move, by the way, from Hyped, I really like. It is a good tempo play with this version of the deck, given the fact that his version of the deck is a lot more it's a mid-rangey kind of feel to it compared to a full-on combo version. You're not relying as much on the stars align, so you can just play it out, drop an Emissary of the Quorum, buff up your stuff, and this is just a very hard board state for MissQQ to chew through, because there's so many stats, and every turn after this it's just only going to get worse and worse and worse. She opts to just TP out of there, which I can understand. It's kind of a rough looking lane, but here we are also just struggling to kind of like make a lot of progress in this lane from the side of MissQQ. This is one of the things also that, like, I mean, Kana does so much. The more that I play with her, the more that I realize that she's just absolutely busted. But she has done this great job of stalling this lane, bringing all the creeps here and just forcing the opponent to chew through them turn after turn, and it's just a really frustrating card to battle against in that way. Now, here we actually see an interesting move from MissQQ. Buying up a bunch of items like this might seem weird. I mean, I know I've been, like, going off about the idea of, like, saving your gold for things like, the horn is really important. Here, though, it's actually, I think, a good strategy, because she's just kind of filling her hand with stuff that she doesn't care about that much into a coup de grace turn, because she does draw anything that's valuable, and in this case, she actually does draw like a track and then another copy of coup de grace, but now you've reduced the chances of dropping a card that is actually good. Now, still gets unlucky, but I think that it was the correct play nonetheless to buy things up in that case, even though you are shutting off your ability to buy a horn later down the line. In some respects, this just feels like a game that, like, at this point, now that you're this far, it's going to be really hard to buy a horn at any point. So you kind of have to just accept that, but it still doesn't feel great. Now, things are looking kind of interesting in how the game is shaping up, and this lane, the left lane, we do have a really good setup to take down that tower and then blink out with the Legion Commander. But the The center lane is going to be falling pretty shortly to that squad of green idiots who've been building up their presence there. But yeah, we're moving in here. Now, there aren't a whole lot of other cards that he can play right now. He can play the Mists of Avernus. I mean, there's cards that can be played, but a lot of them are not great in this situation. Just playing for initiative here makes a good deal of sense. Does get the upkeep kill on this sniper. Now, gusting here is a great way to shut your opponent out from doing anything interesting, like, for instance, coup de grace, if they have another copy of that, dueling as well. You just know that if you do this move that you can't die. Especially since if you've been paying attention to the gold amounts and like following the economy of that, she bought too many items to be able to... She actually never broke into the 25 gold range at any point, so it's impossible to have something like the Horn of the Alpha to play out here and try to maybe set up a kill as a result of that. And then I think you would also need like another item or something like this, but you get the idea. So all of this is really just kind of trading things back and forth. And this was something that the panel was really interested in and like fixing on in terms of like playing for the initiative game right now. And I actually just kind of respect the idea that the initiative doesn't matter. And I'll tell you why. This lane, actually, I would be anticipating to annihilate it next turn. And the reason why is that I can, from the side of hyped. Because if I play both my blue heroes into this lane, then I can be guaranteed to annihilate it, since there's no spell that your opponent has access to that actually kills both heroes at once. Since Kana is one of them, and her health is so high that even if they both spawn right in front of the Legion Commander, for example, then Kana would, and has the Berserker's Call, then Kana would still live at 2 hit points. So there's no way to stop hyped from annihilating in this lane next turn. And as a result, like, the initiative doesn't matter. Now, from the side of MissQQ, the initiative also doesn't matter because your hand is so bad, right? Like, there's just no plays that you have access to for it. I mean, obviously, different stuff. You could draw something different that matters, sure. But, like, all of this stuff, like, playing out... You're relying on drawing something like that in order for initiative to even matter. And even then, it doesn't solve your real problem, which is having this right lane annihilated, blocking you from making any actually meaningful plays. Buying the card draw just out of desperation. Now, the question is where this Phantom Assassin does have the potential to do something meaningful in this game if she moves to the center lane, maybe. I don't believe that they play any copies of Slay in the deck. That's a pretty big loss in this matchup. Being able to slay an Emissary of the Quorum is a big deal. Now, there's no way to get it'll be really hard. I guess a good way to put it is it'll be really hard to get a lethal on this tower in 2 turns. There's just nothing that really works to do that. I mean, you can play out both of the Assassin's Apprentices and just get a little bit of extra damage, and you do lose initiative for doing that, but I mean, like, there's nothing it doesn't matter, as I kind of spelled out before. But yeah, I would just kind of drop them out here in order to maybe set up a kill somehow on this Ancient over the course of 2 turns, since those other lanes are looking so bad, and maybe there's just a way to avoid it. I'll double check on the damage here of how that all pans out in the end. But yeah, so here in the mid lane, we have the opportunity to do something like, yeah, just play out that Emissary of the Quorum again, and just totally disrespecting something along the lines of the coup de grace here, because it doesn't even matter. Like, you just play this out, and then you could double activate the Emissary of the Quorum, and you probably still have lethal on this Ancient next turn, right? Because just things are growing so quickly. It's just impossible to keep up with this size of board with all of this nonsense that's being played. And in that right lane still, we don't have any tools on MissQQ side in order to actually fight against it. But yeah, so activate the Emissary of the Quorum, and then going to activate the second one as well. This is just like, you don't need to have, like, you don't need to go off with a deck like this, because just the Emissary of the Quorum is so powerful off of a squad just even like this. Like, this isn't an impressive group of units, right? There's a couple of creeps and the druid. Like, this isn't an impressive order. You don't need something that crazy in order to build something up to be huge. Track comes down. This is really just like, it doesn't even matter at this point. At this point, basically, I think that the game is near deterministic for Hyped. Like, he just, the contents of his hand are so good that there's just nothing that the opponent can do really to actually counter it. So, like, for instance, the sniper could maybe come into the mid lane next turn in order to block things. But yeah, so we just get this out. Going to just probably pass here. I think that there's not a lot else to be done. So yeah, pass that. Everybody's out of mana. Everyone's out of plays. Got a big attack in. That Ancient is now exposed. Now, in the right lane here, we do have an issue on the side of MissQQ, but, like, what can she do? She can Berserker's Call, I mean, and kind of, like, you don't really even accomplish that much with it. Yeah, so you do that here, and then you get annihilated. So as long as this Annihilation was in hand, there was no way to do it. And the thing is like, this was something that the panel, I think, missed, is that they thought that he was planning to play for this lane, but I personally was expecting them to set this up here, because it's just that there's no way to lose the game from this position, as you've just developed such an advantage in that middle lane that your opponent then has to find a way to slow you down enough to not die there. And it just, with that scaling that you have access to with the Emissaries of the Quorum, it's not possible. So Annihilation does come out here. You knew that you were going to be able to do this no matter what when you had the two blue heroes that were coming into this lane. So that's pretty powerful. But yeah, at this point, there's no plays that can really be made. We have the Horn of the Alpha that comes out here. But this also then goes back to, like, the decision of even spawning the PA into that center lane last turn. If you had just given up on that lane altogether and just raced between you going to the left lane and them going to the mid lane, I think that she would have had a much better shot. Because I believe that she gave up something in the neighborhood of 30 damage or so here, and that's pretty close to what she would have needed, especially with that Horn of the Alpha in hand. Like, you had the PA gone left, the two Assassin's Apprentices gone left, then we would have, that's it, like, six damage times 2 over 2 turns, so that's 24, and then the Sniper could have come over here on this turn, and that's 29, right? 29 addition, and then plus the Horn of the Alpha. Yeah, so I feel like MissQQ kind of threw there at the end a little bit. It would have been much better to identify what was going on and what you actually had tools to fight against. You just didn't have very much to do that could meaningfully interact with that mid lane. And it, like honestly, Hyped's draw, like, in terms of the aggro component of his draw, wasn't even that strong. So he could have gone off even harder in that mid lane in different circumstances. So in this case, I really feel as if, yeah, just identifying where things were actually possible, and, like, seeing that left lane as being a real possibility of going for the Ancient a little bit earlier. I think that there was a lot of possibilities there for MissQQ to get back into that game had she allocated resources a little bit differently. But I also just found it was interesting that the what the panel was seeing and what I was seeing, because I was seeing immediately, I was like, yeah, I think that Hype is just going to annihilate that right lane no matter what, or not even no matter what, but, like, under most circumstances, because the opponent will be forced to try to fight through it in order to get damage on the tower, spend some cards to do so. Hype will annihilate in response, and then we'll go on with the game. And it looks like you're fighting for that lane, but that's just not what you're about. That's not what you're interested in. You're just interested in not dying there because you can take down the game in the mid lane. So interesting game in terms of lane prioritization, understanding when to sacrifice heroes and when not to, because this was, I think, one that was winnable for MissQQ, and just kind of misevaluated the game state at various points. And then, I mean, the casters did that too, even with Perfect Vision too. It's a really easy thing to fall prey to. But anyway, that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and all of that business. It does help to build the channel. I had really enjoyed this game. It was an interesting one. I've just non-stop great stuff from the WePlay tournament team. And of course, check out the VODs that's linked below as well. If you have any specific videos that you want me to check out and analyze, be sure to check out the submission page that's on my website. There you also have a chance to win a $5 Steam gift card if you do so. Thank you once again for joining me, everybody. Take care.